full version of UFC Undisputed 3 has been released, and I'm thoroughly enjoying my plunge into the virtual mixed martial arts world. With full game in hand, I've explored every avenue of this title, as well as the online play, and I have a detailed breakdown of this deep and exciting MMA title. And here's how the game stacks up. Undisputed 3 looks outstanding. The detail to the fighters' faces, tattoos, and physiques is awesome, and it's an upgrade from the Undisputed 2010, which was solid visually in its own right. This title raises the bar for MMA titles visually, and it rivals the visual accomplishment of Fight Night Champion from EA Sports. And that's saying a lot because Fight Night Champion was an awesome looking game. The quality isn't limited to the fighters though. The venues and crowds are also done extremely well, and it goes a long way in creating the type of authentic atmosphere most MMA fans are looking for. So much has been done with the lighting, and it shows the player models and venues off much more. Now, delving in deeper, lacerations are more gruesome and have more variety, but they aren't over the top. There's a lot of blood, but not so much that would make you say, I've never seen that much blood in an actual fight. The blood stains, the attire, as well as the skin of the bleeder and the fighter inflicting the punishment. It's just a small nuance, but it's the type of detail that is noticeable. And I must say, it's joyfully brutal. The animation is perhaps one of the most improved aspects of this version in the franchise. The UFC Undisputed 2010 felt very stiff to me, and that was a bit of a turnoff. This version is far more free-flowing with only a hint of stiffness. It allows for more of the fast-paced action fans expect from MMA fights. Most of the strikes and kicks look the same, but it's the actual movement of the fighters that has been cleaned up, and it's a welcomed improvement. This title definitely brings it from a visual standpoint. It can certainly create the double take moments that non-gamers experience when they catch a glimpse of a visually realistic sports video game. The only things that can improve this game visually would be a tad bit more life to the hair of the fighters and better sync with the commentators' mouths during cutscenes. Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg's lips are still on autopilot during close-ups, and they should probably clean this aspect up or just take it out altogether. All in all, in regards to graphics and animation, it's a 9 out of 10. Let's talk about gameplay and realism. The gameplay was a sticking point for many fans in Undisputed 2010, as it was seen as too complicated and downright intimidating. The developers addressed that issue in the aspect of the gameplay that was the biggest target of critics, which was the submission system. Now in this version, the old, rather secretive submission system has been replaced by an actual on-screen meter that is similar to the system used in WWE 12, which is another THQ Youth's title. Now, an octagon appears on the screen, and a minigame ensues between the two fighters. The object is to actually cover your opponent's player indicator with your player indicator. Spending more time covering your opponent's indicator increases the submission meter and ultimately leads to a submission or an escape. Now, to inject some realism into this little cat and mouse game, the speed of the fighter's indicator is dictated by their skill level on the ground. An extremely skilled submission artist, their icon will fly around the octagon meter, while a fighter who doesn't defend himself on the ground well will have a slower meter, thereby struggling to elude or capture control. It actually works out pretty well, and there is much more rhyme and reason as well as clarity to who is actually in control on the ground. When the fighters are on their feet, the game is at its best though, just like a real MMA bout. The exchanges can be brutal, and it certainly isn't void of strategy though. There are tons of counters and varied attacks to the legs, torso, and head, and the collision detection is solid when fighters collide. The fighters have different weaknesses and strengths, and it is a challenge to learn the best way to fight with different styles. When contrasting styles collide, it's a battle of who can execute their game plan the best and force the opponent to fight their fight, and this is just as it should be. Although the game is definitely easier to control this time around, it still isn't simple or arcadish. I strongly recommend going through the full tutorial though, especially before you get your virtual butt beat online. Mastering the controls and implementing them in the right situations is key. The gameplay and the realism is at an all-time high for the series. The only thing that keeps it from perfection is the slight stiffness I mentioned in the graphics and animation section. It rears its head most in gameplay. It sometimes makes it difficult to employ the foot speed advantage that a fighter like Anthony Pettis might have over an opponent. Aside from that small issue, the gameplay is stellar. The rating for gameplay and realism is an 8.75 out of 10.
This is ground and pound and the victory.
Czech Congo started training in martial arts when he was 5, Mike.
Sound and presentation. Now, the commentary was just okay in UFC 2010, and it is at about the same level here. This is perhaps the most neglected aspect of sports gaming. There simply isn't enough attention paid to maintaining some freshness in regards to the audio contribution of a game. The announcing and catchphrases of UFC Undisputed 3 don't get as annoyingly repetitive as most games as fast, but they certainly reach that point before they should. Up to this point, the best example of commentator usage in a sports game is in NBA 2K12. Now, that three-man group of Clark Kellogg, Steve Kerr, and Kevin Harlan actually sound like they're conversing with each other, and that is a rarity. This game employs what most gamers are used to, which is predictable and generic commentary that is ignorable after about 10 matches. There aren't a lot of specific references to fighters where the action is taking place, and there's no storytelling between the rounds. It's just kind of blah. The presentation, however, is pretty solid. The game uses many of the familiar overlays UFC fans have become familiar with, just as it did in UFC Undisputed 2010. One new addition is the signature ring and or octagon entrances. The fighters show the same mannerisms and rituals as they enter for battle, and it adds a little bit more authenticity to the overall package. The fighters' pre-fight and in-ring post-fight attire is accurately recreated, and there are multiple venues to compete in. There's a healthy amount of UFC referees to choose from for your bouts. There isn't much lacking in the presentation department, but the audio is underwhelming. Overall, this aspect gets a 7.5 out of 10.
And now,
let's talk about modes and options, because this is where it gets downright sick. Now, I say this tentatively because the servers were still experiencing a little bit of issues early on, but UFC Undisputed 3 offers the most comprehensive and deep set of features I've ever seen in a combat sports video game. From the returning and improved modes like Ultimate Fights and Title Mode to the new Pride Mode, this game is chock full of features that will create unprecedented longevity. The game boasts a sick 150 fighters to compete with from day one, with more to come through DLC. Now, all of the expected stars like Anderson Silva, John Jones, and Frankie Edgar are there, but so are a host of others. I'll go through the rosters in some later videos. But Ultimate Fight still recreates great fights in MMA history, but now there's a guided and time-tasked completion list for each fight. It's incredibly challenging and fun to try to execute the game plans of past fighters in their more storied moments. The title mode is largely unchanged, but it offers a cool career mode-like experience, in case you don't want to go through the time of creating a fighter and fighting your way up the ranks. Now, speaking of career mode, it is one of the highlights of this title. It is incredibly deep and features awesome task-based progression, as well as nice creative player suite. Now, anybody that has followed my work on FRANCHISEPLAY.net knows I'm a sucker for a good creative player system. This mode takes you through an entire career, learning new techniques, game planning for fights, joining camps, and gaining new sponsorships. The process has a ton of variety, and it doesn't get monotonous as some career modes can ultimately be. All the while you're competing in your career mode, you're earning cred points. Now, these can be used to purchase unlockables such as fighters like Chuck Liddell and Mark Coleman, and you can also purchase more distinct actions for your creative fighters like taunts and celebrations. You can also buy fight gear like Affliction and Bad Boy shirts and caps. And another huge addition is the actual Pride mode itself. Now, the Pride Fighting Championships, that's a now defunct promotion that emerged with the UFC in 2007. Now, with the UFC owning the rights to all things Pride, they have finally included the beloved history
all of
and
the
nuances
rule
of
differences for
old-school
Pride
are present. You can punt opponents' heads or stomp them as they are on the ground, as well as deliver knee strikes to the heads of unfortunate down virtual combatants. Now, Pride also has different round lengths and other differences that create an alternate experience for the UFC fight. Now, Pride's legendary ring announcer Lenny Hart is on hand to deliver her signature ring announcements. Think about like a female hybrid between Gollum and Yoda. Yeah. Though they aren't what you'd want from your date on Saturday night, it's entertaining in this form. The commentators for Pride are Boss Rutan and Steven Quadros, and they bring a new twist on the action, and it's a nice deviation from Mr. Coming Up Next. I mean, Mike Goldberg is okay, but after a while, that tone kind of gets at me for a minute. And one of my favorite modes, though, is still the event mode. It has returned. In this mode, it just basically allows you to create your own event card. You can designate title bouts and the main events and get special pre-fight presentation for those. At the end of your custom event, though, which you are allowed to name, the UFC Nightly Awards will be given out as well, just as it was in the previous version. You'll see a replay of the knockout of the night, submission, and the fight of the night. It's largely unchanged, but it's still cool as hell. Now, there is also tournament mode, which allows for you to construct old school UFC tournaments. Now, these are the events that require fighters to battle through a tournament bracket in one single night to crown a winner. Now, there are a few references to this in the commentary, but it would have been a bit better if the fighters carried wounds from the earlier fights and their energy for latter rounds or for latter fights were as affected by the early fights. Still, it's a cool mode that appeared in UFC Undisputed 2010 as well. Now, all fight footage is stored on your console's hard drive up to 50 slots, with each round you fight counting for one slot. You'll be able to go back into view and edit these highlights in the clip editor to produce custom highlights that can be uploaded for other gamers to view through the game as well as online. Now, all this, and I haven't even touched the online aspect. This actually features custom fight camps that you can start or join. You can create and share your creative fighters as well as logos and banners. The options are really unreal. The game does employ a season pass. It is a paid service for online play that has become commonplace for sports gaming franchises of late. And much of the online content is only accessible to those who have actually purchased the season pass. It's going to cost gamers $16.99, but if you pre-ordered the game from the THQ store, you could have got it for free. Now, it's the business side of the gaming that most gamers hate, but it does privy you to automatically receive almost all of the DLC that THQ has planned for the near future. Now, the only thing that could ruin this package of features is a faulty set of servers, which I think we probably are free and clear of. So we'll have to see ultimately how that works, but assuming that everything is in reasonable place, this game will keep you playing for a long time. This section is a 10 out of 10. See, overall, this is just a tremendously solid title. Hardcore MMA gamers will love its authenticity and realism, while fans of fighting games will appreciate its pure fighting mechanics. And whether you love MMA/combat sport games or fighting titles, UFC Undisputed 3 will not disappoint you. This is an absolute must-have for any fans of the two genres. The bottom line grade is an 8.8 out of 10. Peace, and thanks for watching. Stay tuned for some extended UFC Undisputed 3 coverage with rosters and such, as well as other news and vids on sports video games.
3 seconds of the second round, declaring the winner by knockout, Junior Cigano.